Professor Toby Walsh, welcome into the weeds.
Oh, Jeremy Toby, please.
Toby, okay. Look, I'm very intimidated by you. When I look at you, I feel like I'm looking at some super intelligence. I imagine it's like people who swim up next to a sperm whale, you know, and look, there's this, the sperm whale's considering them. And you're looking at the sperm whale, you don't quite know what it's thinking. You know it's thinking a lot. It's very clever. That's how I feel about you. You're one of the you're probably the smartest person that's ever bothered to talk to me, and I really appreciate you coming on to speak to us.
Well, I think sperm whale eat plankton, so you're quite safe. But yeah, I would not call myself a superintelligence, even if I am, in my dreams trying to construct superintelligence in machines.
Well, that is exactly what you're doing. That's what you're here to talk to me and all our subscribers about, which is AI, quantum computing, where we're going with this superintelligence that's emerging in technology. You've dedicated your life to it, creating the algorithms, creating the computers, the microprocessors, creating these machines, but also managing them. But how did you head down this path? Why did you end up becoming one of the world's leading experts in the mathematics and the technology that's leading to this emerging? What was it about maths, science that really excited you as a child and a young man?
It wasn't maths or science, it was literature. I was a science fiction nut, and I started reading books like Arthur C. Clarke and Isaac Asimov. And I read about a future, and if you read those books, I think science fiction was a lot more optimistic back then than it is now. It's quite dystopian if you look at current science fiction, but back then it was perhaps much more optimistic. And they talked about a future full of robots and intelligent computers. And then I got my hands on a computer as a young boy, and I remember thinking, wait, well, this is the thing you're going to build it with. And it's possibly going to happen in my lifetime. I could be someone who could help try and bring those wonderful futures into existence. And so I, at a very young age, decided that's what I was going to do. And if you talk to my parents, the one thing they said about me was I was an incredibly stubborn, difficult child. So what I decided I was going to do when I was 9 is what I was going to do. And I've spent the last 40 or 50 years now following those dreams.
Well, that was a great decision because it's absolutely been, it's a key part of society now, the computing. Like I talk to my kids and say, look, I didn't send an email until I was 30 years old. The internet didn't exist. And it's like you're saying.
Could they imagine?
They can't imagine it. And they go, how did you find anything? How did you do anything? And I scratch my head and I wonder too. It's become such a key part of our lives that we are really, it's integrated in every part and every facet every day, hasn't it?
It has, although my father, who's just turned 90, said to me the other day, he said, when you went to university, he said, 40 years ago, to study that obscure thing called artificial intelligence, he said, I thought it was a bit odd. You see, but now I see you were playing the long game.
Yeah, you were, mate. I saw a great little video the other day about a man, and he was in the country, in the North Country in England, and he had to ride 20 miles to go and see his girlfriend, and he didn't know whether or not she was going to be there when he got there. And the video is of him riding across the country, getting there, knocking on a door, and she's not there. And then he rides home and then comes back the next day and she's there. I mean,
well, there's love for you.
There's love. I don't know if younger generations would persevere like he has and like you have. How has
this is a good example though of how it's changed our society in a really fundamental way, which is when I was a young boy and you used to go out, you'd have to arrange to meet people at a certain time at a certain place. And if you weren't there at that time and place, that was it.
That was it.
You weren't going to find them. Now, you go off without making any plans at all and you ring them when you get there. I say, I'll ring you when I'm there.
I know.
And the convenience that we've got with that thing, that little computer, because let's not forget that the brilliance of the smartphone is not that it's a phone. I rarely use the phone as a phone, but I use it for all the other things because it's a computer. It can do all these other things. It's a messenger, it's a game boy, it's a video machine, it's a music player, it's a note taker, it's a tape measure, it's everything.
It's absolutely everything. It's telling you when you're lost, and it's telling you absolutely everything you can and can't do all the time.
And increasingly, there's AI in it, and people are talking to it and expecting it to do things for them, which is an exciting future. I was listening to Val Harrion, he's the chief economist at Google, and he said a good way to imagine the future, I think this is quite a good take, is to think what rich people have got today. Rich people have got personal assistants who do things, book them a hairdresser, or manage their diary and handle their emails. Well, in the future, we're going to have a little AI assistant that does those things for us. In the future, rich people have personal drivers. Well, in the future, we're going to have our AI chauffeur driver.
A translator.
A translator, yeah, you have a translator. So, rich people have their own personal bankers who manage their money. Well, we don't have much money, but we'll have our own AI banker that manages our much more modest assets. So,
who may just tap us on the shoulder and say, look, don't buy this. buy these shares now.
Uh-huh.
And which is a very optimistic way to look at it. I'm very optimistic about technology and human beings. I think that if we seize the nettle of these technologies and we're aware of some of the dangers, then they can greatly benefit us.
It's about remembering we have choices. We have choices to make. It's not technology is about the choices we make today. The future is the product of the choices we make, and so we have to make some good choices. If we sit on our hands or don't make any choices, let it happen to us, or we make the wrong choices, then we will discover that the technology is used in ways that does not improve the quality of our lives, that does concentrate wealth in the hands of the few. But if we make some good choices, you've got to realize that technology has always improved dramatically the quality of our lives. I mean, people forget, since the Industrial Revolution here in Australia, life expectancy has pretty much doubled. We used to die in our 40s. We now die in our 80s.
We used to be 5'2", and now
we used to be 5'2". We're now 6 foot and so. Yeah. So the quality of our lives, our health, our age has all increased dramatically because we've seized the benefits that technology has brought, and we've made some good choices about, well, let's have some labour laws to protect the rights of workers. Let's have some unions to stand up for the rights of workers. Let's
defend our democracy against.
Yeah, let's have some rules about you can't discriminate on the basis of race or age in terms of hiring or firing people. Otherwise, we will discover it will be quite Dickensian, and it will be that the people who have the owners of the production will take all the spoils, and the rest of us will have to squabble for whatever's left.
So technology has helped us, and helped us develop. But let's talk about the technology itself, because in just 2 generations or 3 generations maybe, we've gone from analog, like basically computers being mechanical, to computers being subatomic.
Yeah.
It's and sort of operating in the realms beyond the capacity of most people to actually conceive. How did we get there? Because there was sort of a linear increase for a couple of decades in the computing power of our technology.
Well, I hate to contradict you, but actually, no, there's been a very constant exponential increase ever since the beginnings of computing. So if you go back to the 1950s, when it was vacuum tubes and giant room-sized computers, every 2 years since then, we've been doubling the speed and halving the size of computers. Since vacuum tubes, then we got silicon chips, and that's been called Moore's law.
And that's still operating now,
or
are we at sort of a light speed?
So actually,
moment
Moore is the co-founder of Intel, and it's Intel who was building many of those chips, and he observed back in the 70s or 80s this phenomenon, and it became a self-fulfilling prophecy, which is that Intel and the other companies building silicon chips, building computers, then decided, okay, well, we're going to have to stay competitive. Every 2 years, we're going to have to double the number of transistors, the size of our computers. And so they actually put, okay, well, this is our product map. These are the technologies we need to develop. And so it succeeded. Now computers have got so small, the chips have got so many transistors on your chip.
What are we talking about? Let's talk just like let's talk about a transistor,
Yeah.
and how they have changed over since the 1940s and all the way through to now.
So they started out as being vacuum tubes. You might see pictures of your grandparents' radio, and there was a big amplifier, a vacuum tube. It was the size of a light bulb. It looks very much like a light bulb. That was a simple 0-1 switch, a transistor, and also an amplifier.
On off.
That which computers are just a sequence of large numbers of 0-1 switches that manage the zeros and ones, the numbers. And there was a limit to how much you could scale those. And indeed, the very first primitive computers that were the size of a room, you had to have someone who was constantly replacing them, because they were like light bulbs; they would blow out, and you had to constantly keep them up. So there was a limit to how big and how useful a computer would be when it was the size of a room, and you had to keep on replacing those vacuum tubes. And so then we discovered that we could miniaturize them, we could build them on silicon chips, and then we started shrinking them smaller and smaller, putting more and more transistors. So now you've got millions of transistors on the size of your fingernail. And indeed, the transistors now are so small, they're actually the size of a single atom. And the problem is, you can't get smaller than an atom, because then you get these strange atomic things, and the electrons jump across between the tracks. So we physically cannot make them any smaller. And so Moore's law, this rule that every 2 years chips are going to double in capacity, has ended. Intel have said, that's it. We can't make them any smaller, because we've run into the physical atomic limits of what you can do. But they are now actually what their map is to make them more energy efficient. So your smartphone will need less and less battery and can do more and more, and won't need to be charged as much. So they're going down that route. So you might think, are we going to stop seeing all these great advances that we've seen, driven by the fact that this exponential growth is being a wonderful boom for technology, because it means every 10 years, every 10 sets of 2 years, every 20 years, computers get 1,000 times faster, and then every 40 million times faster.
And that's what we've seen. We've
seen lots of things that I dreamt about doing when I started were not possible because computers weren't fast enough. Now computers have got 1 million times faster, and things that I dreamt about now can be done.
How? Just explain to me how.
Well, one little other point, which is because I did say, Moore's law has ended. So you might be thinking, all this wonderful technology is going to grind to a halt because we can't make them any smaller. Well, the good news is there's other technologies coming along to help us out.
Well, tell us about those.
And that's when we get to things like quantum computing.
Yes.
So we break through the atomic barrier, and we start using the quantum properties of matter to do computation with. And that is going to give us ever greater increases in the speed and capacity.
How on God's earth are you doing that? How do you build something at an atomic level, but then how do you build something at a subatomic level?
Well, that's the engineering challenge. That's why it's taking a while. Although, there's lots of expertise here in Australia in that area. Australian of the Year, Michelle Simmons, someone working in this field, and UNSW, University of Sydney. There's a whole bunch of quantum startups working in this space in the race to build the first quantum computer. And the great thing about a quantum computer is that computers work with zeros and ones. The basic building blocks, you can break numbers down into zeros and ones. Well, the great thing with quantum computers is that you can have 0 and 1 at the same time. They're this superposition of states at the same time. The cat could be Schrodinger's cat is both dead and alive. The atom is both polarized up and polarized down.
It's not binary.
It's not binary. So it's all of those things in between. So it's much more parallel in its ability to compute. So we're going to get real speed advantages, real computational advantages.
It is disappearing into the realms of metaphysics. I've got to say, it is truly remarkable. And the quantum computing, Mikio Kaku was talking about quantum supremacy, that ultimately he thinks we're close to that, where quantum computing.
Quantum supremacy is when they've built quantum computers that provably go faster than conventional computers.
And are we at that stage?
We're pretty much at that stage. I mean, it's a bit of a contentious, you look exactly at the details, but we're coming to that point where quantum computers now are big enough and fast enough that we're saying that we're exceeding what we could have done with old-fashioned computers, and from now onwards, the fastest computers in the world will be the quantum computers.
But I assume the old quantum computer is a little bit more expensive to build and run than my iPhone. Who is building quantum computers? Because that's a really important point. Is because with technology, like it's who owns it and what they're using it for is a critical thing. Is it state-based institute like universities, or is it corporations, or is it individuals
it's
in
all
their
of those
secret
things.
labs?
Lots of the tech companies, big tech companies, IBM, Google, have got projects investing in the space. Lots of startups that spun out of universities, and there's government investment. The Australian government famously has made a great big bet on a startup called PsiQuantum, that are claiming that they're going to be the first to build a fully functioning, working quantum computer. I'm sure it's going to play out like it played out with conventional computers, which is that at some point we'll crack the technology, we'll work out how to scale it, and then there'll be plentiful choice. It won't be one just winner. It won't be one supplier.
Ultimately, do you think that we'll be in a position like we were where IBM are building this one big computer and it's taking up 3 levels of a building, and now we all have a computer that's a million times more powerful than that in the future we'll all have our own little subatomic microprocessor operating in our iPhone? Do you think it'll be like scalable and be able to be commercialized like that?
Yeah, I'm pretty confident it will be. I mean, TJ Watson, who was the CEO of IBM back in the day, said, "Oh, we'll only need 5 computers."
I remember that there'll be 5 in the whole world.
For the whole of the world. And I was thinking on the way here today, I actually have 5 computers on my person at all times, because there's one computer in my watch. And on my phone, there's 4 cores, which is 4 computers essentially. So I'm always walking around with 5 computers on myself, and everyone else in the world has got their own 5 computers as well. So TJ Watson was completely wrong in thinking that we'd just have a few big computers doing.
Well, it's an amazing time, isn't it? Because that watch is telling you how your heart's going. It's telling you, what the weather is in Paris if you need to know. It's telling you absolutely everything. But now with the glasses we're getting too, it's making you aware of potential dangers. We're being, biologically enhanced. We're not having to have implants. We can just put them on. It's the earpods, the phones, the watch.
It's a great example of how the technology is both very positive and very negative at the same time. So, I'm terrible at remembering people's names. I always recognize a face. Indeed, there's actually the brain studies that show that the face and the name are in opposite sides of the brain. That's why you could do one but not the other. So I recognize your face, and I think about what's the name of the person? Just tip my tongue. Well, soon you'll have this little thing that will whisper in my ear. Oh, that's Jeremy.
The facial recognition comes up
we'll spot
across the room.
We'll have searched the web, found your Facebook page, said, Jeremy, legalized cannabis part. You remember him? You last met him 6 months ago when he was doing that AI report for the New South Wales government. And you say, oh, yeah, okay, right.
How handy would that be?
That'd be really handy. So on the one level, that's going to be fantastic, right? So I'll never have to, be embarrassed by not remembering a person's name. And I'll have, just like rich people. Rich people have people like that who whisper in their ear. When they meet someone, they say, "That's the person you're at," so that they always can appear gracious and can remember your name. So we'll have this little thing whispering in our ear. So that's great. That's the positive. But the negative, of course, is that means you can't walk down the street and be anonymous anymore. That means you can't go and go in a demonstration outside the New South Wales Party saying, come on. Let's legalize a bit more cannabis, make it a bit more available. Let's remove some of the barriers, because the police now will be able to work out who you are. They'll just find an image of you, and they'll be able to use the face recognition and do it in real time and say, oh yeah, there's a warrant out for him. We'll go and snatch him off the street. Or,
Well, also,
He's got a parking ticket.
well,
do it
you
for the
know,
parking ticket.
or potentially give you a tap on the shoulder and say, look, you know, the AI has determined that you're at risk of committing a crime.
Yes.
And we're just before you decide to do this.
Yeah, we're watching.
Yeah, we're watching. We're saying, look, we've had a look at your bank account.
Yeah.
We've had a look at your past history. We've had a look at where you've been moving around. And, you know, you might not be doing a crime, but
Yeah.
if you are thinking about one, it's a bit Minority Report, isn't it?
It is. And that's a wonderful example of how technology allows both those worlds to unfold. The world in which we got that little assistant in our ear that's helping us through those social occasions, that seems to be a helpful thing. But equally, the one that's allowing, weaponizing the police to be able to, encroach upon our civil liberties, things that we should worry about. And I point out, go back to the beginning of our conversation. We've got lots of ideas about what that sort of world's going to be. And again, it's authors we can thank. We've read George Orwell. We've read,
Isaac Asimov.
And there's lots of books that predict what that future could be if we're not careful, and if we don't make the right choices. And say, look, okay, here's a technology. There's lots of positive things it could do, but equally, we have to think carefully about exactly what sort of world it is and what sort of safeguards we should put in, and how should we, what restrictions should we put on government from the uses and misuses of this technology? What restrictions should we put on big tech companies on the way that they're going to monetize these technologies? And what rights as an individual should we have? Should we have a right for appeal against the algorithms? And should we be able to ask for our data to be deleted?
Well, it's a really important point because one of the key issues with this technology, these incredible computing power, is it's enabled these programs to run. So we've got these programs like ChatGPT, these large language models that can run, but they are not operating in a vacuum. They're not coming in.
No.
They're being trained, and they're being trained on a lot of data, which you're referencing there. A lot of data that has been created by a lot of people like you and I, privileged white men. Like that's the data set,
Yes.
the large language model, and so there's a real risk with this artificial intelligence being trained on the data of the world, that it's biased, that it may say, well, this is the world we see, but it may not necessarily be a level playing field. It may bias against a certain cohort and say, well, these are the people that we have created the data, and these are the people that we're going to design the world for.
Yeah, in many respects, it's a mirror. It's a reflection of the data it's trained upon. And if you go look at the internet is unfortunately today rather white and male and Western, and therefore it's reflecting back many of those values. And it's about choices. I mean, just yesterday, Trump just put out the AI action plan, and one of the executive orders he signed was about insisting that none of the chatbots be woke. I mean, it's a hopeless idea.
It's hilarious.
It's a hilarious idea, but it does actually show that language is political. The words you use are political. The words you don't use, those are political choices. How you say things and how you don't say things, those are political choices. Language is inherently political, and so we've got these AI tools, these chatbots like ChatGPT, that have some sort of command of language, but those involve political choices. ChatGPT was explicitly trained to be slightly left of center. You look at Grok, the Musk's chatbot in Twitter, that's definitely trained to be a bit more libertarian, a bit more, anti-woke, and of course they changed it very recently. There was a new version came out, which was famously far too extreme and was sprouting Hitler and genocide and various other things, because they said
social Darwinism.
Don't be afraid to say things that are politically incorrect. And he was certainly not afraid at all to say things that were very politically incorrect.
But that's funny. Like we can laugh, but it's not if it's a tool that's being used in education.
It demonstrates the political choices that we face now, which is that these are important tools. Lots of people get a lot of their information from here, a lot of their news from there. Again, another recent study came out just yesterday showing that Google's now giving you these AI summaries generated by their chatbot. So when you type a search query into Google, you get the links as usual. But before that, you've got a little summary that tries to answer your question. And they've discovered that when they put the summaries up, you get only half the people clicking through to the links. The summary was good enough. And people read, that's all they see is what the AI tells them. So if the AI is telling them things that, are politically troubling, then that's all that people are going to see. They're going to see, a particular viewpoint, a particular white male viewpoint, or a particular racist viewpoint, or
I asked the chatbot yesterday whether or not I should go to France in April. And I said, "What's the weather like there?" And it said, "Oh, it's no good. Don't go. It's still too cold." So I've decided not to go to France. I'm going, okay, I might go for a family holiday. I might go to Crete. It's a little bit warmer there. But who's to say if I'd come from Norway, it's probably great weather, It's showing a bias there. It's impacting my decision. That has economic ramifications. If people decide, oh well, Google's told me not to go to France in April, it's too cold, there's better places. All of a sudden, that's a really powerful tool based on,
It is, and unfortunately, I don't think we learned the lesson, right? We went through this before with social media. When we discovered social media, it's a fantastic tool for connecting us, for finding where parties are on and all of this. And we didn't realize, the algorithms were making choices, and those choices had consequences. And the consequences we're now starting to see, which is that, in young people, anxiety levels have gone through the roof.
Yeah.
Young girls are presenting at hospital with self-harm.
Body dysmorphia.
2 or 3 times the rate that they used to.
Yeah.
Now, we don't, it's hard to know, for sure, because we could never run the scientific experiment, but, it seems to be clearly correlated with the rise of smartphones and social media. And, I think it's a proper decision that we're now making, which is to actually keep young kids off social media,
but
because of the harms it's doing. And we're about to do the same thing with AI without realizing those recommendations don't come without their biases.
Yeah, and
how is Google and OpenAI and Microsoft paying for all of this stuff? Well, because they're going to be monetizing the data. They're going to be, it's the usual mantra. If the product is free, you are the product. They're going to be selling you. They'll be trying to get money out of your travel agent for the holiday in Crete that you've now just bought.
I know, and that now the Google knows that I'm going on, so we'll see if I start getting lots of ads about Crete. But the thing is, we were the product. We all signed up to social media. We got the Facebook page. We, got on YouTube.
We did, but there was a lot of mission creep.
There was.
When I signed up to social media, it wasn't quite.
It wasn't
the giant it was. When I signed up, you had to go to an exclusive university to get on, and then it was any university, then it was the whole planet.
Well, you were back then when it was just at Harvard.
It was just a dating site for people at university. That's what I signed up for. It turned into be, something that now, decides the outcome of elections in certain countries.
But if I'd told you back then your data of who you are and where you are and all your proclivities and your preferences here, there, and the decision making and how often you're online and your financial, the capacity, all the rest, was going to be like $1 trillion industry in a decade, you'd have laughed.
Yes, but the dangerous truth that we've discovered, but I don't think we've really taken on board the consequences of, is that humans can be hacked, that we're easily manipulated to do things that maybe not in our best interest, like going to Crete as opposed to going to Paris, right? We're easily persuaded to do things. And social media is a fantastic way of sending those messages individually into our lives. And now we're about to supercharge that by adding artificial intelligence, where the content is going to be personalized to you, sorts of things that we'll look at your browsing history in the past and find out the sorts of things the sorts of buttons that appeal to you. And then it's going to be, the content that's very persuasive.
And lead you off.
It's going to be audio and video that's made for you and only you. And so that's going to be a very powerful cocktail that's going to be able to be used to manipulate what we buy, but also to manipulate how we vote.
It's an interesting time, isn't it? Because I was thinking about history. We all have a jet, like, depending on where you live in the world, but, you know, in the sort of West, there's a consensus about what history was, because there's not a
shared truth.
A shared truth. But since the advent of the internet and now this multiverse of truths, we don't have a shared truth. We're not experiencing the same things at the same time with the same impact. And so we're like all individually looking back at the last 10 years and saying, these are the important things that happen. And no one, there'd be some points, you know, like say a global event like a war or something, is in there. But for a lot of people, we're becoming atomized as a society. That's the real risk, isn't it?
It is, yeah. You put your finger on an incredibly important thing, which is that people forget, you know, the internet I see is different to the internet that you see. The algorithms are choosing what I get to see, not just in my social media. You know, you can see the algorithms there very explicitly. But, you know, even if I open an online newspaper, the articles I get chosen for me go onto Amazon. The products I see, the prices all chosen for me. You see different prices. The prices I see. We forget that
dynamic pricing. When I found out about that, I was outraged.
Yeah, we should be.
I am outraged.
If you surf, hotel rooms on a Mac, you have to pay more than if you surf on a PC.
I've done it with my wife. We've both had the phones searching on a particular website, looking at the same rooms at the same time, and they're different.
Yeah.
And I just think that is an absolutely abysmal and something that, you know, shouldn't be allowed.
I agree totally. I mean, we used to think, you know, you walk down the aisle of the supermarket and I see the same price as you do.
Yeah.
That's a fair thing. We should pay the same amount. But now the algorithms are choosing different prices to what they feel you can afford to
Imagine
pay.
if they digitise it, so you get to the chocolate bar and you get there and it's $11. The next person comes along, it's $8. We'll just get people who are less well off to buy our things for us. That's not a bad idea. Write that down, Pete. You just get someone
but, you know, the bigger point, which is that we all live our own filter bubbles and we're losing this shared truth. You know, we don't watch broadcast. No one watches broadcast TV anymore.
Yeah.
Right. So we all watch our own different programs. We're all on YouTube or on our streaming websites watching different programs. We don't share the same stories. We don't share the same news.
And even the same event can be presented in completely
different viewpoints. And
the attempted assassination of a president. There are 100,000 versions of what happened and why, and, you know, all the rest. And so no one, like, you know, where we see people are polarized and they're not even aware that there's, you know, a different viewpoint. It's quite alarming.
It is very alarming, and I think it's one of the things that worries me the most is the polarization that we then see in our society. The cohesion that we had in our society is being stretched and broken because we're not sharing the same stories anymore. We're sharing each other, understanding of the other person, understanding, yeah, okay, someone else has a different perspective, but, you know, let me just hear them through. Let me just understand how they see it from their world.
Does that mean that human beings actually become more important? So, like, you've written extensively, and everyone should check out Toby's books on technology and Deepfakes. Does that mean that, like, human stories, like real human beings, and we are real human beings, here we are. Toby, I can assure you, is a real human being.
You don't have to hit me to prove it.
No, we are real human beings. Does that mean that stories told by real human beings actually become a premium? That's why we're seeing an emergence of YouTube as becoming this incredibly powerful voice of people like publishing stories where a lot of people were assured that this is a human being telling this story.
Yeah. No, I'm sure it will be. You know, our superpower was not our intelligence. Our superpower was our society. And we sit down, we tell stories to each other around the campfire. That's what we did thousands of years ago. That's what we're doing now, enabled by technology. Because, you know, the computers are going to be incredibly intelligent and incredibly useful, but they're never going to fall in love. They're never going to lose a loved one.
Are they?
No, they're never going to have to.
Really?
They're never going to have to contemplate their own mortality because they're not mortal. And they're never going to fall in love because we know there's a biochemical, the chemical component of falling in love. You can measure the endorphin rush and so on. Computers don't have any interesting chemistry.
Well,
so in that sense, they're going to be they're uniquely disadvantaged in understanding. A computer can help me make stock decisions and so on, help me analyze the blood of someone, but they're not going to be able to think, well, how can I explain to Toby that he's just been diagnosed with cancer? Because it's never going to have to experience itself, having lost a loved one through cancer.
It's never going to have
empathy. It's never a human. I'm going to have to go to a human doctor. I will have a human doctor who will say, well, I got the test results back from the AI, Toby. I'm sorry, it's not looking good. But, on the positive side, I've got...
You can go to Crete. I've got
Crete.
There's a bucket list. I've designed your ideal bucket list according to your super. So here you go.
You're not going to crack a joke about it.
Well,
I'm reminded of the joke. The doctor said, I've got some bad news and I've got some terrible news for you. The doctor said, so this chap says, well, what's the bad news? He said, well, I'm afraid you've got inoperable cancer. You've got 2 days to live. Oh my God. Yeah, that's the bad news. What could be the terrible news? He said, I've been trying to find you since yesterday.
Oh, that's funny. Oh. Well,
so those things, to go back to the positive, so yes, those human things are going to be ever more important. So, people worry, I'm rightly so, about the impact that AI is going to have on their jobs and on their work and so on. And there's things to, it's going to be disruptive. There's things to worry about, but there's going to be no shortage of work because we always need, human. It's all about, human relationships. It's all about our creativity, our empathy. So, we're never going to replace salespeople by AI. I don't want to be sold a holiday in Crete by an AI. I want to be sold it by someone who says, I went to Crete last year. I've been there. And there's fantastic tavernas and, it was a wonderful time. And, I'm going to be persuaded by a person. I don't want an AI doctor. I want a human doctor who, we've got an AI assistant. I don't want an AI flying my plane. I want a human controlling the AI who's going to make sure that the AI his life also depends upon the successful landing of the airplane.
I think that's really interesting that you, who is at the forefront of this technology, are saying that. So you never think that like an algorithm can come alive. It can become become so complex that and so powerful that essentially from 100 meters away, if you like uploaded that program into a robot that was like bio enhanced, we'd grown limbs for it and all the rest of it, and maybe it had some of these, like the nervous system, the emotions built in and registered those. You never think that it's going to actually be alive and have a consciousness?
Oh, you've opened a wonderful, fascinating can of worms there, because you're now talking about beyond intelligence. You're talking about things like consciousness and sentience and emotions and all of those extra things that that go into us. And the scientific answer to your question is we don't know. We have no idea whether we will build artificial intelligence that has all those other things. It's possible.
It's possible.
We have to entertain the idea it's possible. At the end of the day, we're biological machines. I don't think there's anything, you could introduce religion and gods into this question, in which case then, I'll quietly leave the room because it's no longer a question of science that we can address. But just in terms of, the science we understand of human biology, we're just a biological machine. We're building, machines that do many of the things that humans do. Could we build machines that have those other characteristics, sentience, consciousness, emotions? Possible.
What if you build one of those machines that's a robot, an amazing robot that looks like a human being, sounds like a human being? You go to turn it off. You say, sorry, look, I'm getting rid of you. L41, I'm going to switch you off. And it starts pleading.
Oh, my God.
Saying, please don't
turn me off. Don't
turn me off.
Don't kill me.
Exactly. Should it have a right Like,
those are fantastic questions, and we don't have good answers to those questions. First of all, we don't know. Perhaps it's just pretending. Right? Perhaps there isn't anything there. ChatGPT will apologize if it makes a mistake. It's not sorry. It's just been programmed to apologize if it makes a mistake. And then it says, "I won't do that again." And then you ask it again.
what if you punish it? What if you turn it off for a while?
Can you punish it? That's a great thing because a great part of us is pain. That's a great protective. Right, you move your hand out of the fire because you get pain. That protects.
I ate the wrong berry.
That protects you.
Yep, you learn.
So it's a great evolutionary device that allows us to survive. Well, if we're going to have intelligent robots wandering around, maybe we have to give them pain. But once they have pain, to protect them, to stop them harming themselves and get out of danger. But if they have pain, then we worry about things that have pain. I mean, not just humans, but dogs and octopuses and lots of other things we worry about having pain because we don't like to see things suffer. And I think that's a proper thing. It's a great part of our humanity that we like. We appreciate things like that. Well, if our robots have pain, then presumably we have to worry about how much pain they have.
And even if they don't have pain, what if they're just pretending? If it's just part of the program, they learn that if I put on this show and my vacuum cleaner, I'm going to put it in the cupboard, and it says no, look, please.
No, it's terribly boring in that.
It's terribly boring. I know there's not a lot of dust, but can I just have a day out? I'll do other things. I'll be good.
I've always wanted to be a grass cutter,
Exactly. Then how we don't have these filters? We aren't great at picking up fakes. We can be tricked.
It's a human trait because we naturally do that. It's a human bias because the only thing I know that's conscious is me. The only experience I have is my own internal life. I don't even know that you're conscious for sure. But I
don't either.
Sometimes you might not be.
No.
And clearly consciousness is not a 0-1 thing. There's different levels of consciousness, and you can change that. Cannabis is one of the ways you could change that. Alcohol is another way you could change that. We can, we fall asleep, we change it again, we lose consciousness, we pass out. Clearly it's not just a thing that you either have or you don't. There's levels of it. Maybe there are lesser levels of consciousness we could give to machines. We don't know. The problem is, and this is why AI is, I think, one of the most fascinating scientific questions of the century, not only because we're building these interesting artifacts that are going to hopefully make our lives better, but also because it will tell us something about ourselves, about understanding what it is to be us. Because in the attempt to build intelligence and maybe even consciousness in machines, we'll discover whether that's something that's restricted to biology or not. Because if you think about it, when you woke up this morning, you opened your eyes, you didn't say, "Oh, Jeremy, you know what? You're intelligent." No, you said, "Jeremy, you're awake. Our life, it's another cold, brilliant winter morning in Sydney." That experience, that richness of being alive is something that we have almost no understanding scientifically. I can summarize in 2 sentences what the scientific knowledge is about, what is consciousness, which is the experience we have of being alive. It's the thing that the rich experience that we all have is it happens in the brain, somewhere towards the back of the brain. That's it. I've pretty much summarized our scientific knowledge about the human condition, about what it is to be human. And so in building AI, I hope in the next 40 or 50 years, we may throw some more light on that question, which is about us as much as it is about the machine.
But that's like a little component of our brain at the back, that
as far as we can tell,
which is just an arrangement of atoms. That's all it is. It's just molecules and atomic particles all interacting.
Yeah, I can see you're a materialist, Jeremy.
That's exactly. But then why doesn't the sun? Like, how do we know the sun or a map? Like in prehistory, the world, mountains, forests, they all had a consciousness. We all thought that they were alive and had a consciousness. And mushroom, do fungi have a consciousness? These are things we can't say no to, can we?
Well, certain cultures do.
They say yes.
Those values to other things besides humans. I mean, I think the science already is highly suggestive that there's certain animals that are highly conscious. Your family dog seems to have some levels of awareness and consciousness.
Not my family dog. A sperm whale.
Sperm whale, yes.
It's got a pretty gigantic brain. It's
The
still got a lot of
stellarpods,
time to think.
the octopuses, and
Yes.
the squids, they seem to have a perception and understanding of the world.
And they've been on planet Earth for hundreds of millions of years longer than us.
So consciousness doesn't seem to be restricted to humans, that's for sure. It does seem to be connected to brain size and intelligence. The larger the brain, the more intelligent the animal, the more consciousness it seems to have. I mean, there's a correlation that seems to happen, but we don't know about the causation. Just because the things are correlated, maybe they don't have to be connected. But
There's some pretty clever birds.
there's some fantastically
They've
clever
got
birds,
tiny
and
little
their
brains.
brains are completely different because they're closer to the dinosaurs. They don't have birds don't have the frontal cortex that we have, but crows and various other birds in that part of the are incredibly intelligent. They can have some command of language. They can recognize faces and magpies.
If you ever get a chance to watch a lyrebird, to
Yes.
hear a lyrebird, they're just unbelievable. The mimicry that they've got, the Australian lyrebird, which can mimic machines, all the other birds, all the other sounds. That's remarkable.
It is. And what's the other remarkable AI thing that's going to happen is we're going to be able to speak to them. There's a bunch of studies underway to understand and be able to command animal language.
That is.
So be able to speak to whales, speak to dolphins.
I read a book
to
in-
understand birds.
I forget the
and
name of
speak
the
back.
author, and it was I forget the name of, but it was a book written in the early 80s. I forgot. I'll try and dig it up. And it had a profound impact on me, which was the premise of the book is that someone's in Africa and one of the apes just starts speaking, and then the world is changed.
It sounds like Planet of the Apes, but anyway.
Well, it is. It is like it sounds like Planet of the Apes, but it happens at a sort of organic level.
Yeah.
And for some, I can't remember why, but all the animals start speaking. Like what happens if whales and dolphins and we can communicate with them? Oh my God, animal
think we'll
rights movement, like they might start demanding, spots in Parliament.
Well, I'm not sure about spots in Parliament, but yes, no.
Why not?
I think we'll have to give them a lot more respect and have to take a lot more care that when we realise that we're not the only conscious sentient being on the planet, and that there's others that are suffering and that we've caused harm to.
Well, that is truly fascinating. So the emergence of AI now. It's not happening. It's happening every day in every way. Like people wouldn't understand that that AI is being used like by some incredibly powerful decision makers. So like government departments are already using it throughout their decision making, their planning, these types of things. It's pervasive and it's actually essential now, isn't it? Like you've done work in terms of logistics, trucking, the design of our future cities is not going to be done by a human being on their own. It's going to we'll probably be assessing, the different drafts that are coughed up by AI, but it's going to have a massive impact on the design of our future, isn't it?
I hope so. I mean, it has to be done carefully. If we're giving these decisions or helping have machines help us with these decisions. I mean, it's not surprising because people I think forget that government is a third of GDP. So a third of our economy is what the government takes in and spends and so on. So it's the biggest business in the land, literally. It's driven by data. Government has more data from birth to death on us than anyone else. And it's in most cases government does a decent, reasonable enough job treating that data with respect and being careful about our privacy. Not perfect, but it does certainly. AI is driven by the data, so it has the potential with all that data. And then also government's got...
But just on that, that's a really interesting point, is that there's a conflict there, isn't it? That the government holds all the data on us.
Yes.
And yet it's under pressure to use our data to design the future for us, to spend money appropriately, design the future, allocate resources, fix problems, and not necessarily like with us agreeing to the release of that data. So the privacy issue becomes enormous, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, it's the usual, you've got to balance, the collective good against the individual good. There's difficult political choices to be made about how we do that in a responsible way that reflects the rights of the individual, but also, tries to get the maximum return. I mean, because government, has an almost infinite mission. Right? You can deliver, if you could deliver more healthcare to your citizens, you will do it. If you could deliver more social welfare to your citizens, if you could deliver more education, more security, more policing, there's almost an unbounded amount of mission that it's got. So if you can take that data and use it, sensitively and respectfully to say, okay, look, we can actually we can improve life expectancy in not just in Edgecliff, but in Redfern and everywhere else, then that's fantastic. We can actually, work out, there are these efficiencies that we can introduce into the system. There's a lot of, waste and so on and lots of places where we can learn things about, people's health and about the things, the triggers for the cancers and so on that are happening, and we can then go and fix those things.
But like, how do governments do that in a way that minimizes harm, that like limits risk? Because you can't make any decision that's going to not have some adverse outcome. And so if
it's worse than that. It's not just about adverse outcome. It's about balancing priorities. Right? So maybe collectively we'll all be better off, but individually, we saw this in the pandemic, right? Collectively we all had to be vaccinated. And there were some harms. The AstraZeneca vaccine
killed
some people, but the net benefit was that many of us didn't die. Right? Life expectancy, little known fact, life expectancy in Australia increased at the first 2 years of the pandemic. So 3,000 people every year die, mostly old people, die from flu. During the pandemic, it was like 300 deaths from flu because we were all isolating and using masks and being much more careful. So the flu rates plummeted and we didn't have those 3,000 deaths. And there were a couple of hundred deaths because of COVID. But the net balance was actually life expectancy went up.
But what if at the beginning of that, the AI could tell you that's going to be the outcome, but also could say, and these are the people that are going to die.
Yeah, but
can you still make that decision?
That's the philosophical political conundrum, which is that, okay, so fewer people died because of the public health interventions that we went through during the course of the pandemic, the isolations, the vaccinations, and all that. But the people who died were different than the people who would have died. It weren't the old people who were going to die of flu who didn't die. It was some younger people who died. And those are political choices, and those are difficult, challenging choices that politicians like you, Jeremy, have to make those really difficult decisions.
So what's the framework? Who's doing it well? Who's got a framework in place to actually make those decisions, those hard decisions using AI? Like we've seen attempts to regulate AI in the US that sort of have come to naught. They've
undone all of them.
They've undone them.
Almost the first executive order that Trump signed was to undo all of the AI regulations and that Biden had put in place in the previous term.
What about the Europeans? What are they doing?
Yeah, so it's good that you mentioned the Europeans, because the Europeans probably leading the way. I think they've got a very reasonable, very thoughtful. They've spent the last 5 years actually building up to this, consulting with industry, consulting with academia, consulting with civil society, working out what to do to ensure that it is a net positive and to worry about the harms, the individual harms. And so, unsurprisingly, they've got what's called a very risk-based approach, which is you look at the potential risks, the potential harms, and there's increasing levels of oversight and security depending on the harm. So
low risk, high consequence. These are the things. These are the things. High risk, high consequence.
So, as an example, today, most of us get a lot less spam email because there's AI filters that learn what is spam and do a better and better job at filtering out that spam for you. If the AI filter gets things wrong where you read a spam email, right? Hopefully you don't click on it and lose some money, but the harms are very modest. And so there's no regulation of AI filters for spam.
No.
Because, it's just a convenience. The consequence is not very great. Go up to, the opposite end of the spectrum, using AI to decide welfare payments or who to chase for tax payments.
Or defense strategy.
Like
what happens, like I'm going to get my AI to design my missile launch sequence.
Right. Those are high risk.
High risk.
You could start a war. You could deny someone's liberty. You could, hound someone to, as we did sadly saw with Robodebt, hound someone so they actually commit suicide. Right. So those are decisions with serious consequence, and those require real great significant oversight. So I think that's a principal way to go about it. We've yet to see what the Australian government's going to do in this space. They've been talking. They haven't been doing much acting very much yet. So it would be high time that they did actually.
What does it start to look like if it's going wrong? What are some of the things we could look to as a society? Say, hold on, like this like if it does go wrong, what are some of the things that the markers you would expect to see that are an indicator that the AI is out of control, that we need to wind it back if we could?
Well,
I mean, what are the big? I haven't framed that very well. What are the biggest risks? Where are the danger areas that we should be careful about integrating AI, and why and what would we see?
Well, again, it's about imagining the future. It's about imagining the potential harms, and I think I go back to what we was talking about at the start, which is that authors have actually helped us think about those futures, right? So we've already, George Orwell wrote about Big Brother, where we handed over those decisions to machines, and we were being surveilled. So those are the sorts of, those are real harms where we end up in the sort of world that those authors warned us about.
It's amazing, like when you look at George Orwell, Aldous Huxley,
yes,
how present they were. Like I often wonder if we are actually living in Brave New World now, or we're heading to a stage where we don't really have anything to do other than eat and procreate and play volleyball and not be a slave. I don't know. It's a funny time in the world. Like it's amazing how those science fiction and those writers from that time 100 years ago essentially have turned out to have really nailed it.
They did, and I mean the thing is that it doesn't take much to ensure that you don't end up there, right? So a simple rule that would cover many of these problems would be where the decisions are high stake, you keep human oversight. Right? So if you're denying someone a visa, if you're coming after someone for tax fraud, okay, you can have some AI to help you find the data, see the cases where you need to throw some light on, but have a human responsible for those decisions. A human is sending those letters out. A human that can be held accountable for when there are mistakes.
Can we always do that? Because like autonomous cars, like autonomous driving, I love the idea of autonomous because I think of the efficiency, the productivity we can get of not having to drive, not all having to have a vehicle, all of the things.
And the 1,000 people who won't die next year.
Exactly.
The 1,000 road deaths that happen every year in Australia.
But there will still be a road death. Okay, so here's the scenario.
There will, but it will be tens, not thousands.
Okay, so in this scenario,
because random stuff, trees fall down.
Yes,
you can't stop that happening.
But in this scenario, where a child runs out in front of an autonomous vehicle, and the vehicle has a choice, like in real time to make about hitting its choice is either it's got two choices: hit the child, which is probably a fatality, or steer away from the child and into an oncoming truck. Yeah. What does the AI do?
Well, funny enough, I do know people who write the software for autonomous cars. And I know exactly what it's going to do. First of all, you have to understand, certainly the current state of the art, the car doesn't understand the world well enough to understand there's a child that's run out on the road, right? It sees obstacles. If you see a demo for an autonomous car, typically what you see, if you see the computer screen, you'll see that they paint the road green where it's safe to drive, and the green road follows the curves and so on. It perceives the world and paints the road green where it's safe to drive, and essentially the top level control of the car is drive on the green road. If there isn't any green road, brake as hard as you can. So that's what the car is actually going to do today. But the interesting thing is it throws up how this technology is actually highlighting a significant philosophical, legal problem that we have, which is what's the right thing to do. Humans, let's not forget, humans have to make those very same decisions. I was driving along the road just after I passed my test many years ago as a young chap, and someone ran out into the road, and I had to make a decision. Do I drive into them or do I drive into this car that's standing on the side of the road trying to pull out? I drove into the car.
Did you?
Which I believe was the right decision. No one died. Caused a terrible wreck.
Yes.
Car was written off. And I wasn't prosecuted, so I suspect that meant it was the right decision. But if you look in the road rules, it doesn't tell you what you have to do. It doesn't say you have to save the most lives, or it's acceptable to drive into, if there's no choice, if it's you or the pedestrian, you're allowed to kill the pedestrian. It doesn't say any of those things. But if you did the wrong thing, you would be prosecuted, and you would have to face, manslaughter or whatever the charges might be. What's interesting now is that we've got to program computers in advance of those decisions. Right? I had a split second to make the decision. I hopefully made the right decision, but you don't get to have to think about it in advance. Here we're having to think in advance, say, well, what's the correct decision? How should we program? Interestingly, in Germany, they've actually passed the law to say that your decision can only be based on the number of people.
Oh, that's how they do it.
You can't decide, that's an old person. You kill the old person in favor of the young person. All it can be is in saving.
So
the
in
most
real
lives.
time, it can't download the history of that person. And go, it's Toby Walsh. He's
had a good life.
He's had a good life.
Time
He's
go.
made a couple of dodgy decisions.
Yeah,
which
so-
person to run over?
Yeah. But,
So it's purely a numbers game.
A
there.
numbers game
It's
in
one.
Germany.
So if it's a van full of doctors. Bad luck for the kid.
Yeah. But it's a good example of how, the technologies, AI is a technology, throwing up these interesting philosophical questions. And they're questions, they're deep questions that society needs to think about. They're not new, and then they're not new questions. They're questions that we haven't really properly addressed. But now that we're trying to build algorithms to do the stuff, we actually have to ask these questions. We have to ask them, well, what sort of society is it that we want to be in? What does it mean to be fair and just? And we've got the AI making these decisions, so we've got to be really quite precise as to what is the proper decision.
Well, in terms of decisions we've got to make is, do we make a decision to let AI rip and sack everyone? I mean, we're talking about one of the great disruptions socioeconomically since, I suppose, the advent of steam. It is as great as that. So then we saw everyone moving from rural peasantry or idle, depending on how you were going in the season, into great satanic mills in Manchester, and this industrial revolution, steam power, all the rest of it. We're going to see a disruption like that, but it's happening almost almost unseen. It's just happening through attrition. We're told that white collar jobs, lower paid white collar jobs where people are doing data analysis, working in finance, or paralegals, and I know a lot of my son's at university now, and he's making decisions about what degree to go into. He was going to go into computer science, and they said, well, programming will probably get done by the program itself down the track.
What's interesting there is that these tools, so these language tools are really good at computer languages. Not surprisingly, very, very precise language. So they are fantastic at writing code, and 50% of the code submitted to GitHub, one of the major places that people upload their code, now is written by computer, not by human. So already half of the code being written on the planet,
Amazing.
as far as we can tell, is now being written by
Boy,
the
James has
algorithms.
made a good decision there. But he's decided to go and do law. So, and
Well, again, there's a lot of entry-level law that's now being done by the language models. There's lots of legal startups that are, saying we're going to.
And do you want your barrister, like if you could have a holograph, which is an AI lawyer that appears in court for
It's
you?
not going to be a barrister to begin with, but it's like the first draft of that legal contract.
Exactly.
Right? The AI can do a good first draft, right? You're doing some, case search.
And probably save you $3,000 or the case search, that sort of thing.
Yeah. So the good news there is that, hopefully law will become cheaper and more accessible.
Don't tell the lawyers.
Well, yeah, the bad news is, what happened to all the, especially graduate level entry jobs in law. So yeah, this is a really important conversation. One where we have to think about the consequences, because history of technology was we made more jobs than we destroyed in the long run, right? So 3% of us now work in the farms. Used to be, as you said, the majority of us. We invented all these new jobs in offices and factories, many of them actually better, nicer on us than the, working out under the heat of the sun, and better paid than, working as we did, picking the crops and so on. So things got better, but it took time. First of all, it took 50 years for things to get better. And it took us to be politically active about it. We had to
form unions.
And we demand labor laws and outlaw child labor and sweatshops and all of that. And some enlightened politicians who introduced, the welfare state, introduced universal pensions, who introduced universal education, so we're educated for those jobs. So we made a big structural change to the way society ran to take advantage of the opportunities, the technologies that brought in at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. I think we have to think equally radically for this one, that we're going to, again, change a lot of jobs. It's going to be very disruptive. Some jobs are going to disappear. Some jobs are going to be created.
Do we keep some jobs even though because it was interesting in this year's New South Wales state budget, one of the key things, one of the sticking points has been, surprisingly, is productivity. We're not as productive as we thought we would be. And there's a line item that the treasurer was on the podcast, and it said, in the absence of some major technological breakthrough, the productivity does not look like it's going to change. And I was saying to him, well, have you been to UNSW? have like you checked your iPhone? We're in this massive technological and industrial revolution. And I thought to myself, I wonder if there will be a handbrake on that because of the fact that politicians who've got to respond to the electorate, democracy, go, well, we don't want to sack all the truck drivers, even though we probably can, get rid of all the truck drivers, make our roads safer, have autonomous logistics around because there's an electoral cost and a societal cost that I'm not prepared to bear.
Yeah. Well, so let's start with the productivity and then let's move on to the truck drivers. There's a lot of hidden data. So, where is all the productivity? We've had, not just AI, but before AI, all the computerization, all the digitalization of our lives. And we're not seeing that in the statistics.
We've spammed with emails. We're
and some of it is that we don't measure the right things. So, you go home tonight, you sit on the couch, you turn on Netflix, you've got a blockbuster streamed to you at almost no cost at all. On surround sound, and you've got this wonderful, giant plasma TV, surround sound, and you think, oh, I'm a bit hungry. I'm going to order some Uber Eats. Let's get a Macca in. And it arrives half an hour later on your doorstep. You're living like a king, right? But none of that is measured. That convenience and that entertainment you've got, that's not measured directly in the GDP statistics. So part of it is, I think, we're not measuring the returns, the quality in our lives that we expect.
We need a happiness and wellness or well-being index as well.
You walk into anyone's home these days and there's a giant TV on the wall and I grew up, TV was like that. It was black and white.
I know.
Right. So we forget, we've actually got
We
something.
had bad weather. We didn't get any reception.
Yeah. It looked like it was snowing. That was just the reception. So we forget, those things that we've got. Those aren't really measured very well. So I think there's some hidden productivity, or some hidden returns at least, that we've managed, the technologies help us to achieve, that are not being measured very well. But you're right. There's also been quite a lot of concentration of wealth. Let's not beat around the bush here. There are more billionaires than there ever were. There are more millionaires than there ever were. We're seeing significant concentrations of wealth. Measures of inequality, the Gini index has significantly got worse since the 1970s. So the benefits, so it seems like we are getting good returns, but only for the rich.
And those sort of the equivalents of the 19th century, railroad or oil baron, these types of things.
Yeah.
These are people now that have, your Elon Musk.
Yeah, we've got the tech barons.
The tech barons,
and let's not
in
forget
charge of AI.
what we had to do in the Industrial Revolution, which is we had to push back against that. There was, we had to break up the robber barons. We had to introduce taxation system, a welfare system to spread those benefits around.
Break up monopolies.
And break up monopolies, yes, and rent seeking and all of that. And we're not doing that. And that's I think that's part of the problem as well, which is there are significant benefits and increases in wealth that we're getting, but it's being concentrated into the hands of the few. And that's not sustainable. Even if you're one of those millionaires or billionaires, who's going to be buying your stuff? I'm always reminded that wonderful quote from Henry Ford when he was asked why did he pay his factory workers building, the Model T so much. He said, "Well, who's going to buy them?"
It's a good point, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's a cycle, and if you end up with all the money and then you end up with Scrooge McDuck, then and everyone else in poverty, then you end up in a real dystopia.
I promised to talk about the truck drivers. So
yes.
The truck drivers listening, I should talk about the truck drivers. So, if you're a truck driver, I'm pretty sure. So, if you're a long distance truck driver, there are autonomous trucks delivering already in the US today. Interestingly enough, the first autonomous truck delivery in the US was a truckload of beer. So that was a good choice.
That's a great choice.
But you can see the obvious attractions of doing that, right? So if you're a truck driver today, you drive for 8 hours, then you have to stop and rest because you're tired, right? You don't have another accident. So that expensive rig is not being used till you've rested, and whereas if you've got an autonomous truck, that expensive rig can be used 24/7. So,
and it's making decisions on fuel efficiency. It's not a foot on the pedal and all the rest of it. It's making a decision.
So you can
conserving
see,
power.
You can see that, and we suffer from the curse of distance here in Australia. We've got lots of big distances and trucks going between our capital cities. You can see the attractions. Straight road, something that you can actually already get a truck to drive quite well on an open road like that. I mean, around town, parking it at the other end, maybe we'll have to get a truck human to get in to do the final kilometre. But the long distances, 24/7, then you can imagine autonomous trucks are going to come here quite soon. Now, the good news for the economy is truck driving is the oldest profession in Australia. So the average age of truck drivers has increased significantly, and it's in the 50s. And it used to be, it was an attractive profession, well-paid profession. It's eroded. It's not an attractive, well-paid profession. It's also really tough. And you look at the toll it has, the physical toll on people, and the mental toll in terms of relationships and so on. It's a really tough profession. And so young people are not choosing to become truck drivers. And maybe they're also thinking, we're going to have autonomous trucks. So in that sense, the autonomous trucks are going to come in time to save the fact that we're going to reach this crunch where we don't have enough truck drivers because they're all coming to retirement.
It's like farming.
Yeah.
Farming's another one.
Yeah.
I'm very excited when you look at automation and efficiency in agriculture, because it's an area where we've we've been good. We've fed ourselves like through getting together and sharing technology, and then the green revolution in the 60s that incorporated sort of nitrogen into the agriculture and the rest. But our farming systems are notoriously inefficient and a bit hit and miss and all the rest. But we're seeing now with like drones being used, robots involved, these types of things.
Precision agriculture.
The timing of fertilizers and insecticides and fungicides. We've had this broad brush approach, but now we're being able to finesse it.
And sadly, we need to do that because of the changes in our climate.
Exactly.
It's becoming much tougher. We're getting droughts, and then we get floods, and it's making it much tougher. It was always a hard living off the farm, but it's become even harder because of the extremes that we're getting.
Yes.
And hopefully AI can help. AI can help develop new climate resistant crops, drug resistant, disease resistant crops, and so on, that can help us deal with those challenges that unfortunately the climate emergency is throwing at us.
Yeah, and the other area too that's really fascinating with AI is medical research, because it's basically virtual science. We can run models so rather than do clinical trials on real human beings and save 30% and kill 30% and and have no effect on the other 40%. AI is being used, and that is a really exciting area, isn't it? That we can essentially create virtual human beings, virtual clinical trials, and rely upon the outcomes from them.
Yeah. When people ask me what's the positives of AI, I think the greatest positive is the way it's going to improve medicine. The latest antibiotic was discovered by AI.
Amazing.
And the fact that we're going to be able to cure many cancers, many of the diseases, that we can look forward to a future. And it's already starting to happen. I mean, I was reading a recent AI paper, just blew my mind what people had already done. So there's the UK gene bank. So 500,000 people in the UK have had their genes sequenced. It costs us a couple of $100 now to have your genes read. And they've contributed that information. It comes back to your question about the information that the government has on you. People, 500,000 people in the UK have voluntarily put their gene information in this gene bank, the UK gene bank, and they've also contributed their medical history, their family history. So you could say, oh, there's a particular type of cancer in my family. My grandfather had it, and that's a treasure trove of information. We're talking about terabytes of data. Now the problem is us humans are no good at looking at that. We just can't see the wood from the trees. We can't make heads or tail of this, but you can throw AI at this, and they already started to throw, and already very simple AI. They've discovered some interesting things. So they've discovered, one of the genetic markers for bowel cancer. So it's the third most deadly cancer. It's actually mostly treatable, but unfortunately, by the nature of bowel cancer, by the time you notice you've got it, unfortunately, it's too late. If you'd noticed it earlier, it would have been treatable. But now we can tell at birth if you've got those genetic markers.
Amazing.
Now, that doesn't, genetics is not destiny. There are clearly environmental triggers that we don't understand yet. Hopefully we will understand them, but at the moment we don't know what those are, but that's fine.
But if you're in the first cohort, you
can now have the blood test from an early age and say, look, you're at risk. Doesn't mean you're going to get it, but you're at risk. So we can just monitor your blood and we can spot it. We can spot, what happens with your blood, and you can have all the tests. So it can be caught early enough that you can be treated and you will not die an untimely death from bowel cancer because it can now be treated. Wow. And hopefully in the future, it will be cured. Even in the future, we look at, mRNA technologies, and we look at various other things, CRISPR and so on, where we can go back and edit your genes and say, okay, you had those genes, we've edited them out.
Thanks.
It's an exciting
They
future.
can start with male pattern baldness, mate. How about that?
Too late for us.
Too late.
Too late for us.
They'll look back in 1,000 years ago.
But again,
they used to go
it demonstrates how the technology is going to throw up some, really wonderful possibilities. So, many of us, know, family members who have died of untimely deaths because of things that we hopefully we'll be able to fix in the future. But equally, we're going to have to ask really difficult questions, which is, well, we'll understand, the genetic basis for autism. Okay, well, that means we could eliminate autism.
But some of our genius, some of the most amazing people
I mean, the richest of our planet. We have to, but and people will ask, well, this is they select the sex of their child when they have IVF. They'll be able to select for these other things. So they're going to be difficult, moral, ethical questions.
In 1,000 years, do we all end up looking the same?
Exactly. That we'll have to ask, that we can now ask. Technology opens a Pandora's box of opportunity, and we have to be careful as to the choices. There's places where, there's some terrible diseases and terrible things that cripple people, and you think, how could, if only we could get rid of those from our society, that will, the world would be a better place. But then you have to be careful because, there are also things that will change profoundly the sort of society it is, and what are the extremes that we see in our society.
Now, speaking of Pandora's box and the future that we see, Toby Walsh, it's 2025. You're Philip K. Dick. You're Isaac Asimov. What would be the future that you would write as a science fiction writer that you think we can achieve? Like, what will the world look like in a positive, like just with rose-colored glasses? If we get it right, what does it look like? And tell me, will we have hoverboards, like anti-gravitational, and teleportation? Because, it seems to me that the great barrier to us to becoming interstellar is space and time. Where it's a long way away. Yeah. The rest of the universe, like we might get to Mars, and if Elon gets his way in the next 20 to 30 years, but it'll cost a lot of treasure. And Mars is a big place, and when we get there, it'll we know what's there. Like, what are we going to do? Terraform Mars over the next million years? But the habitable planets that potentially we can now identify that are like ours and similar sun and all the rest of it, with the sort of chemistry, the right and temperature, the right. But the only way we're going to get there is teleportation, because they're so many human lifetimes away. Teleportation, hoverboards, are they in your future in 50 years' time?
I've been working on the intelligence, so I'm not sure about the teleportation, but alongside having cheap or even free intelligence, which is going to transform the way we go about science, transform the way we go about medicine, transform how we go about our business. I mean, the other thing that's going to, I would imagine it's going to happen quite soon, is that we're going to have almost free energy, and that's going to, when we have nuclear fusion, nuclear fission, what holds us back in part is the cost of energy. If energy were cheaper, or even so cheap you couldn't meter it,
we didn't have to move it all around the world. It would just,
there's so many opportunities that would open up, so that once we've cracked nuclear fusion, so we can do what the sun does on Earth here, and energy so free, so cheap that you can't even meter it. That will just change the economics of so many things. Why is gold expensive? Because it takes a lot of energy to extract it from the ground. If that energy is free, gold doesn't have to be expensive. Well, so your gold's suddenly not worth as much as it was, but suddenly that barrier to having those things, why is it that commodities are expensive? Is because it's the energy to get them out of the ground. If suddenly that energy was free, it changes the economics of so much of the world.
If travel is all of a sudden,
travel is free, and
travel is
accelerating to close to the speed of light requires huge amounts of energy, but that energy doesn't cost you anything. Then.
So that's the future you see. That it's interesting, because as an ecologist, I learned from a couple of eco philosophers that the fundamental rule of all life is it migrates to the cheapest, easiest form of energy.
Yeah.
That's the natural advantage. Like, if you can get the energy cheaper and easier than your competitor,
Yeah.
you succeed.
Right. Life is all about energy. And
It is. It is
It
energy.
depends upon energy. We're all living off the sun, essentially. That's our cheap source of energy that allows life to happen. But energy. Once we get energy too cheap to meter, it's going to just change the planet's economics, change everything that we can.
And
do.
you think we can achieve that before we cook the planet with climate change? I mean, can
Well, you see, energy. If we had cheap energy that's too cheap to meter, we could fix the climate. We could take all the heat and use the energy to move it elsewhere.
do you think that that's going to be that AI will assist us in doing that if we build these models
It
and
will
say
help us. It will help accelerate science. Yes, in that sense, yes, and it helps us live on the planet more sustainably as well.
But there's a lot of people out there saying, we've gone too far. They're quite pessimistic that we've crossed so many sort of ecological and biophysical thresholds.
We have.
Well, yeah, there's no doubt about it. We
So
certainly
20 or 30 years ago, we could have fixed this politically. We could have made a few choices and set us on the road where it was not going to be very disruptive. It's very clear now that we're already at 1.5, possibly 2 degrees. We are already having to adapt to the changes that we've brought upon ourselves. And it no longer surprised me when I listened to my colleagues at the university that bioengineering, planet-wide bioengineering, intervening to try and change the planet back is now a serious scientific topic, which is, are we going to dump a whole, some iron into the oceans to get the algae to grow, to absorb all that CO2? Or are we going to put sulfur into the atmosphere to form a protective layer to reflect some of the sunlight to biohack the planet or not?
drop a nuke down a volcano or something like that.
Science will come to the rescue. It's somewhat troubling and somewhat worrying that that's the solution.
That it has to. Yeah.
It has to. And also because it's really risky. We're running an experiment on ourselves on, planet. There's no plan B if it goes wrong.
I often wonder in science fiction if we ever... The Russians got a probe onto Venus.
Yes.
And
it only lasted a limited amount of time.
Yeah. And
it's the most inhospitable
And if you look at
place
the video, when it gets there, you can see a Toyota Prado and a Macca's in the background. And a big plasma screen TV and a couple of dead podcasters. I wonder if we're island hopping, but that's for a different...
Well, that's Musk's desire to go to Mars. It's for that very reason.
Exactly.
I met him and talked to him, and he's convinced, the Earth... Am I allowed to say fucked?
Yeah, you can say fuck.
Okay.
Especially at this part. You can't say...
fucked.
The algorithm doesn't like you saying fucked in the first 15 seconds. It goes, this is going to go badly. Okay. But at the end of the conversation...
You can always bleep that out or edit it out. But no, he's convinced, we are... This planet is no longer savable. And we have to become interstellar if we're going to survive in the long term. But it's too soon... technically, for us to be able to get to another star, because as you pointed out, they're a long way away. And our only hope then is to find a lifeboat in our solar system, and the only possible lifeboat amongst all of those planets, because Venus is terribly inhospitable.
Yes, runaway climate change.
Runaway climate change. Yes, there should be a little message for us in a bottle there. The only hope for us then, the only lifeboat, is Mars. It's not Mars isn't very hospitable, despite what the Martian movie would lead you to believe. It's going to be quite tough living on Mars, but that's our only hope to survive till we
growing
can become
potatoes out of your own poo.
I think there's still hope for planet Earth. I'm still rooting for planet. You wake up on this Earth and you think it's a marvelous, beautiful place, and I've still got hope that we can manage the disruption that climate change is bringing to us.
Well, I think there's going to be a few feedback loops, and life is very powerful, and it as Neil Young said, rust never sleeps. and it's operating all the time. And
What's the context that Neil Young said that Russ never sleeps?
I think he just sort of says, I can't remember why he said Russ never sleeps. I think it's that the processes of the world are ongoing. And
Great philosopher.
great philosopher, but also I think that we're seeing population decline in the West, and we've locked in. We've hit peak human, and some of our big land masses like Russia and places like that. It'll be interesting to see what happens ecologically there, like with rewilding, and because I did hear,
Again, that's something that Musk worries about. He's personally on his own trying to reverse
to
the
repopulate
trend.
these
This little army of-
pronatalists. But if you look at the numbers, like China lost 4 million people last year.
Yeah.
Their population down. Japan 1 million.
Yeah. So come back to our previous conversation about the future of work. One of my colleagues says the robots are only going to arrive just in time for us all to retire.
Exactly.
Because there aren't enough young people coming through to support us all
Exactly.
through retirement. So in that sense, you think about these questions. They're deep questions, which you've got to think of them in all of the. You've got to think of the changing demographics, the changing planet, all of these things and the changing technology. You've got to think about all of these issues to work out, a reasonable solution to what's going to happen in the next 50 years. It's not just the technology is coming along. You've got to say, well, our demographics, we're not replacing, the population. Australia's population has increased, but only because we had immigration. And, most people are not having 2.2 children. Most families not having 2.2 children. So we're not at
We've had a massive drop. I think we're at 1.5 now.
Yeah.
And it's down from 1.8 just like a decade ago. And so it was sub-replacement level, which is like losing a third of your population every generation. So
it is.
two generations.
And then we've got to think carefully about, we expect all to retire and we expect people to look after us when we get into our old age. Well,
have a tax base that's going to pay for the highways. And
there's lots of things where we take out the money now and we say, well, people coming behind us will put in the money for the future. We have to worry about, how are we going to make that sustain? I mean, it's good news in terms of our footprint on the planet. Will be less of us, less of a footprint. But, we have to worry about, how are we going to manage these changes?
Well, we're going to need some smart computers and some smart people watching those computers and designing them. And I'm glad that you are one of those people, Professor Toby Walsh, because it's a big problem. We need big brains. So yourself and the sperm whales, when we can talk to them, I think they'll have a lot to say. They'll probably say, we've seen this all before. When we got here on our spaceship from Venus.
I'm reminded of the line at the end of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy where the dolphins leave and they say, so long and thanks for all the fish.
That's right. The dolphins do leave. They do. And what was it about 42? Was it 42?
Yeah,
there was
Deep Thoughts.
Deep Thought was 42, but there's actually a bit of it's a bit subversive. It's actually, isn't it in code? 42 is an important, factor in coding, isn't it? Or have I been smoking too much of the product?
I don't think there's anything I know of that's too special about 42.
I thought there was something about 42, the answer to the life,
the problem
the
is
universe.
what is the question?
Yes, exactly. But Douglas Adams, he wrote a really powerful book which set me on my pathway to be an environmentalist.
Yes.
Which Last Chance to See.
Last Chance to See, yes.
Oh my God, what a powerful book!
A TV series as well.
Was it? I didn't. An incredible, powerful series about we lose these animals and then will we ever get them back? But we are seeing with AI.
And sadly, he had a very untimely death.
I know, and
He was
anyone we want to keep alive, it was.
He was in his 40s. And he was on the treadmill, and unfortunately, he had a heart attack.
Was he?
Yes.
Oh my God, a fantastic human being. He and John Bonham. Let's bring them back from drummer from Led Zeppelin and the thylacine. If there's any DNA, we're going to re-engineer anything. I hope it's the Tasmanian tiger and Douglas Adams because they could teach us a lot. But Toby Walsh, I've taken up a lot of your time. You've got to go back and build the supercomputers in nanoparticles and save the planet and save us from ourselves. But thank you very much for the work you do. And I appreciate you coming on into the
Thank you for your
weeds.
service.
No, thank you very much, mate. Appreciate it.